There are a number of books on successful coaches and what makes coaches successful. I think the things that I've seen in my career are the relatability factor of coaches to their athletes. I don't know that it's an age thing or generational thing or any specific diversity variables, but really more the relatability. I think some of those factors that I just sort of dismissed in terms of demographic or diversity variables or age or sex or any of those things do have an influence when it comes to relatability. If I see somebody that looks like me, that's been where I've been, that has achieved, then it might be easier for me to relate to them. But I think for those of us in positions of privilege and power to understand that we might have to do more work to close that gap and be more relatable to our athletes is really important. And again, I say us from the perspective of an older white male, making that connection with a younger athlete. So I think the relatability piece is really important to overall athletic success. Obviously, knowledge of the sport. And then I think for the most part, what athletes really want to know is, do you care? Do you care about them outside of their sport, outside of them being a very talented boxer? Do you care about them and their life? That's something that I think is easily changeable in coaches. So that coach that might have been more detracted from or separated from their athletes 20 years ago, they might need to do a little bit different relational work to get to know their athletes. And I don't know that you have to be their friends on social media per se, but understanding that they do have a social media presence or the social media life, understanding that they have a life at school, they have a life outside of boxing, and really integrating all those aspects to bring that into the ring is really, I think, where a lot of that relatability can happen, thus the motivation, thus the positive performance. The research on coaching is, again, a huge database on coaching and coach education, and there are actually now programs where you can get a degree in coaching education, coaching and coach education. So that is a huge movement for us in the field of sports psychology in terms of, and even in coach education, which is sort of outside the field, but a little bit tied to sports psychology. A lot of the stuff that I've seen is the positive coaching, the individual coaching, even when you're coaching a team. And really that piece of understanding your athlete, understanding what motivates your athlete on that individual level. I think most of the successful coaches that I've been around have understood that piece. That it's not about me, this is about the athlete. And if we can get out of our own way like that, then I think we have a more positive influence on our athletes. Understanding that if you're at your job, if you have your regular 9 to 5 and your boss is always on you about something, that doesn't tend to be the most motivating situation. We tend to get backlash towards our bosses. We tend to get frustrated. We tend to get amotivated. And that's similar to the way our athletes are built. So understanding that, yeah, there are times when you do need to yell at them to motivate them. My coach has always said, I'm yelling at you because you're across the field. And I said, yeah, but I'm right in front of you, right? So that was my little joke always going through. So understanding there are times when you might have to get loud with an athlete. There are times too that you might have to get soft with an athlete. And I mean that in terms of volume. I also mean that in terms of sometimes they need to be loved up, if you will. And just, again, that sort of impact, what impact do we have on our athletes and understanding that. Then the other thing that comes into coaching style is just an interactive style. Am I more authoritarian? Am I more authoritative? Am I more demographic? Am I more laissez-faire? And those aspects of our personalities and the way we approach coaching can influence our athletes. Some athletes really want that democratic style. Hey, look, we've got 3 things we need to get through today. Which one do you want to do first? So giving them some control in that situation so they're not always sort of being put upon. If you're a more authoritarian or authoritative coach, understanding that and being able to explain that to your athletes. Like, look, I do get loud. This is what it means when I get loud. And really knowing yourself a little bit more so that you can explain that to your athletes. The loud coaches I had were always just loud, and I never understood. And my collegiate coach was not a loud person, and he would explain to us, like, I don't feel like yelling is motivational, and if I yell, then it's because I'm stressing too, and I need you to listen, right? So even being able to take those steps with your athletes and with your boxers and saying, look, if I'm loud from the ring, it's because you're not responding the way I would hope you would. So let's have a conversation about how can you listen for my voice, for instance, right? And having those little nuanced conversations with your athletes about the way you want the coach-athlete relationship to be, especially when stress enters the picture. So when we go to that Golden Gloves bout, when we're in the gold medal match of that tournament, stress is an amazing influencer and motivator, but understanding yourself allows your boxer to understand you, and it allows them to start to understand themselves in those stressful situations as well. One aspect of psychological care for others is caring for ourselves. I think the same can apply to coaches. When we give so much of ourselves for the thing that we love, which is the growth of youth athletes, the development of young athletes, or the nuanced trainings that we do with our advanced athletes. The amount that we give of ourselves, we have to be willing to sort of accept some of that support from our support systems. Most of us have those support systems, and sometimes it's just about identifying who those people are, right? So that finding that balance, and again, if you want to coach 6-7 days a week and that brings you joy, go for it. Also recognizing that a day, 2 days, 3 days off is a good thing. It can be a healthy thing. And recognizing too that when we get into those ruts, that's when burnout starts to set in. One way to break out of the rut is to change our schedule. So yeah, I think self-care is very important, especially in coaches and the support staff around athletes. We talk to them about getting good sleep, about taking care of their diet, about not over-exercising, but getting out of their training facility to do cross-training, things like that. I would say the same thing applies to us as coaches and support staff. We really need to take care of ourselves. The analogy that a colleague of mine told me recently was, if you ever really listen to the pre-flight instructions when you're getting on an airplane, you're supposed to put your mask on yourself before you put it on the other passengers, right? So you have to help yourself in order to help other people. Given the breadth of boxers that are really influenced by USA Boxing, the hope with a lot of my work is that we start to create materials for coaches at various levels. So the entry-level kid who at 4, 5, or 6 years old just wants to get some exercise and finds a boxing gym, how do we foster their love of boxing, their love of sport, their love of competition in a healthy way? All the way up to the kids that will get selected for the elite team at some point and will go on to be our gold medalists. The hope is that through videos such as this and through some handouts and publications that we're already working on and planning to release on the website, is to supply coaches, again, youth coaches, juniors coaches, and even that entry-level coach with some materials that they can talk with their athletes about regarding motivation, regarding focus, regarding mental toughness, minimizing distraction, resilience. Those are all really, I think, super important topics that our young athletes start to integrate into their world far before we get them here in an elite camp, for instance. Those kind of things, I think, are super important for our coaches at that entry level to know about and to really understand that they can foster, even if it's only a few hours a week that they're seeing that athlete. They can really be that positive influence on that athlete.